I'm really happy to be here and sharing my research with you today. A special guest. Let's see how much focus I can keep around. So just to have a broader sense, for me, it's a very safe space to be sharing this research. And this is part of what I'm presenting has two parts I will explain. But I get my funding from the PCE to do the picture, so that's part of that what I will show. But I would like to share with you my dissertation. So, but basically what I want to understand the relationship between conservation and tourism. That's what the title is about. So this is my general problem, which I will not read. I translated into this. So that's what I've been telling you, the relationship between nature-based tourism and conservation. And in nature-based tourism, specifically community-based tourism and ecotourism. Those definitions are usually overlapped. And so that's why I put both of them. In the case of ecotourism operators, they work specifically with ecotourism, but the community is not necessarily what the tourism that they conduct or community-based tourism. But there is an overlap of those different. We'll explore both eventually if I get enough of it. And in conservation, I'm focusing on protected area co-management, specifically the regional protected areas in Montero-Alvarez, which is in the Amazon. So for me, it was a journey in all sense. So I'm a field biologist. So I went from this, very confident, chasing primates around the forest and measuring trees, to this, to start learning about things of sociology and anthropology and theory of change. So it's been a lot of information and also filling the IRB. So now I'm somewhere in between here. So far, so a mix of everything. So it's been a long way. So I'm finishing my second year in the PhD program. In fall, that will be my third year. And so yes, most of you relate with that. So my research project has two phases. The phase A is the pilot fieldwork, which I conducted last summer. And the phase B, I call it the real fieldwork. Which I will conduct this summer. Yes, this summer, to close. So I will first give a very brief overview of why this issue is important or why it's calling my attention. So there is this growth of the tourism industry worldwide. There is now being non-stop the tourism, especially of the nature-based tourism, the ones that have grown the most globally. So you can see all this information is available. You and World Tourism Organization, they have a lot of charts and following up because it's a huge industry. So that means that tourism represents an important economic activities. 1 in every 10 jobs in the world comes from tourism and so on. So you have all these economic figures that gives you an idea how of the tourism growth worldwide, which also led to this constant growth of tourism, led to concern over the use of natural resources and the impact over not also natural resources in protected area, but local communities. So it's growing faster than we can implement policies or even start to visualize all the actors that are actually involved in the tourism. We have very clear what the mass tourism, classic tourism is about. You have the tour operator, the restaurant, the hotel, so on. But tourism is starting to enter 2 areas that the stakeholders are not being considered. We start applying this formula, ecotourism, everywhere. And so that's why I find it really interesting to understand. And tourism and conservation, both activities have effect over the natural system and over the social system they are involved. That means that they use the natural landscape. Both of them are impacted by it. And they also are embedded with social system, the people that live and depend on natural resources that is used for tourism and also for the community's natural resources. And both of them have implications for long-term sustainability. So for protected areas, particularly in developing countries, sustainability of protected area is always something challenging. And you have the managers of protected area have to always fight to get budget, or the budget doesn't get cut, so they have to constantly prove that that area is sustainable. So that is supportive sometimes, not all, but sometimes support the local community that can manage these some extensions of the area. In some regulations, they can manage the protected area. But it's always a constant challenge. So that is also another implication. Special particular type of tourism is implemented. It could or not, that's what we're figuring out, have implications for the functional stability of the protected areas. And we also think that it will have implication on the way the communities define their development pathway. Not necessarily has to be based. It could be diverse activities that provide them a set of tools or strategies for them to have their own development definition. So, however, there is a gap in our understanding between the dynamics of conservation and tourism, especially the case for local communities in the Peruvian Amazon neighboring protected area. In practical terms, that is that we don't know how communities are managing, and in the policies, regulations, plans, the community's vision of particularly tourism is not incorporated. It's always, of what I've seen, is the eco-operators, the ecotourism operators, or the regional government, but they don't envision communities as the stakeholders for tourism. They do have it very clear for natural management, but in terms of tourism, they are not. They are not envisioned as the stakeholders, or that their actions have repercussions, or some link in between. That's why the arrow a little broken. But what did I do? What did I do during summer? Which is the presentation phase today, but I'm giving you a little bit more. So, no, I didn't actually do that. I wish I did, but what I did is I conducted my pilot A phase, which was a pre-dissertation field research funded by TCD. So thank you. That helped me a lot into understanding how will I manage data. And I've been in this place before, but working for conservation projects. So I use the tools that I use for this research, but for diagnostic or for implementing projects. So doing it now for research was very different. So I was fortunate enough to go a long time in the field, so get my setup ready to field research, and that was a good thing. And also helped me to see how much data we were able to manage and how much we were able to systematize with the interviews and all the things that I did. It was a good tryout for me. So this is the field phase, pilot A phase of the research. So I wanted to identify what elements of social capital from conservation influences community-based tourism. And we use the definition from Elinor Ostrom of social capital. So there are thousands of definitions of social capital, but Elinor Ostrom's definitions have been used a lot in natural resource management for fisheries, dogs. We draw from that concept. And she groups them in three elements. She said, well, basically social capital is what keeps a community healthy, the state of how a community is in terms of socially talking. So she says that there are three elements of social capital: trustworthiness, formal or informal rules or institution, and networks. And so that's what we wanted to figure out, what dimensions of this social capital are manifested in the community, and from those, which are used or which the community perceive as their influence community-based tourism or not. Maybe they are completely separate and they don't perceive that the social capital they have developed over the years has nothing to do with tourism, something completely separate. But we were interested in figuring that out. So I went back to the Amazon. Actually, that's the last picture of my cup. I lost it, so that's why I wanted to put it. It was very nice until I lost it. And so that was the title. That's the poster that I also presented. Field work, Latin American Studies Festival. And also for the today that I presented the graduate student research day, I was in the poster. So it's social capital from conservation influencing community-based tourism, a host perception study in the Peruvian Amazon. So all this field work was getting out of my comfort zone completely, but it was very fun, and I like it, so I'm gonna continue to go farther in my comfort zone, hopefully. So my study area is in Peru, in Loreto, which is in the Peruvian Amazon. So this is Peru. Loreto is all the green stuff up there. And this is a very poor map of, um, of Loreto. We have a saying in Spanish that is, en la casa del herrero, cuchillo de palo. We're from Especla. I forgot to ask my advisor a good map, which we do have a lot. So that's in the process. This is an even worse map of my study area. So that's the protected area that I'm working with. The Mishaku-Tawayo Communal Regional Conservation Area is an area administrated by the regional government, not the central government, which has different administration policies and regulations. The communities are right outside. There are 17 communities in total. So that's the protected area. They're basically lowland rainforest, and has particular, in that space you have the lowland rainforest that is flooded most of the year, and then all the time you get this huge hill forest. And some endangered species live there, like the red huacari and other dolphins. I took that picture. I almost fell off the boat, but I wanted to include it in here. So this is, and you can find this information online as well. They have a lot of biological information field has worked for many years. So they have all these cool materials for the one of it. So there are around 17 communities living outside in particular. They all live outside. And only three of them are working based tourism, which are the ones that I focus in order to understand the relationship. In the future, probably I will work with more, but as this was the pilot phase, I little and kind of figure out what was happening. So these communities, specifically those three communities, have been managing the area, have been protecting it for more than 30 years. So they have this background, social capital, very strong, that I didn't know it was social capital until I started the program here, and I started reading, and I knew they managed fish and palm trees and wildlife. And for me, as a biologist, it makes sense, but I knew there was something missing that I would understand. And when I started reading about this, like this was the piece, learning process of how this and why this community managed so well, why they coordinate, what the dialogue, why they are able to face challenges, and so on. So you have this background, this community is working for, actually it's a little more than 30 years, but overall it was 30 years to work in the area. And they're highly organized. I work in other areas where they don't even meet in the community meeting, and they're very easily corrupted with illegal loggers or hunters. But in this case, it's very different. That's why I'm really interested in understanding how do they work and why. So those are not my pictures, but really cool. So what I did is a lot of literature review, interviews, unstructured interviews, and one book. And so we're 19 open-ended interviews. I interview all the households that were conducted. They're implementing tourism. So it's very family, rural based. What they do is in their houses, they habilitate, they home. And there are some that began like 10 years ago, and others 2 years ago. They find tourism as something that fits into what they do, not something additional, but it's something that they can easily incorporate when they have the opportunity to. And also to community leaders and authorities. That interview a lot of people, and it was one of the methods that I used with Angelica. We designed this timeline. After all the literature review, I was able to map out the main events of the basin, and with that we identified. It was filled out. So I put some major events, like the creation of the area, the first time they start organizing in terms of natural resources, of some threats, like the monoculture, so employee monocultures that were arriving, and so we had this. It was too big. I ended up making a short one because I happened to time with an interview, and it didn't fit on the normal table. I have to put it on the ground, but it was really helpful. But they start feeling out and also how they perceive things that changed the way they reacted towards certain events, and I ended up with a real timeline. So the focus group included this, and it was done at the end. So after I conducted all the interviews, I had an idea what they were main perception towards social capital manifestation in the community and how this influencing our community. So the focus group, I think it was like probably 2 hours or more, but it was very interactive and they were very engaged into it. And so I think the next one. So this is the results and the summary after, and also as I recorded, I was able to hear after, which is actually very helpful because when you are like more body, you take notes and all, but then you listen to yourself, which is also really weird. But then you start taking notes at home. But if the focus group was it was something really cool. It allowed me to make like a collective statement towards things, and they also discussed among each other. I basically did nothing, just kind of facilitate the focus group, and they were very into the stuff and put the little flip charts into what it corresponds and their capacity to overcome challenges. So the first and the left side are the elements of social capital that manifest in the community, and they identify themselves with capacity to overcome challenges, constant dialogue, capacity to work together and coordinate, and sense of belonging. And the sense of belonging of the community and protected area was in all of the interviews, focus group, and so on, even the talk that I have, informal talk that I had, they refer to it as my protected area, my fish, my animal, my country. It was a very strong sense of belonging. In other communities that are more the forest, the lake, something that is out there is not owned. So it was very interesting in any dialogue. Even in the interviews, the focus group, or outside the community talking, it was that sense of belonging and caring. And I put a quote from one of the community members of from the interviews, that these forests and animals are ours, and we suffer when something happens to them. It has taken so much for us to protect them. They're like our sons or daughters. And it was a common thing. They said this in different words, but the same message during the interview, that they are very protected over them. And it's taken them like 30 years to get here, so you can talk about how important it is for them. And I mentioned this because when I arrived there 2 months ago, before I arrived, the sons of a community member that lived in Lima, these kids came back to the community. And apparently they have hunted certain animals. And although it's not illegal, it's against the regulation. And it was a huge scandal. And I think there were only 2 animals, but they were highly affected by it. Right? They, in their perception, like they was disrespectful. That, and all of them brought it up. I mean, there were only 2 animals. To be honest, I don't think that will affect the whole ecosystem in terms biologically speaking, but socially it does. But that kind of tells you the impact that it has for how strong is the sense of patrolling or controlling inside the community. For me, that was fantastic. And all of the people that I interviewed, they mentioned that incident that happened. I managed to timeline it like 2 months ago, but when they talked to me, it was that it happened yesterday. Yeah, they can, and the detail, they were highly affected by it. The fact that these kids came, they had no idea the word they have for them years, but they knew that their father should tell them, we take care of the sport so much. So that in other communities, they wouldn't want to do animals. I want to share that because it was really cool. And so that's the elements of social capital that manifest they see, and so the perception of how they manifest in the community. But there is also manifestation in community-based behaviors. So they conduct natural resource management, where I've been telling you, the natural resource management agreements, they have in their book of the community minute. They have probably 4 or 5 pages of the specific instructions of how natural resource management needs to be done, like what type of net for fishing, what the stage of the animal, it shouldn't be like pregnant female, and so they have these detailed, specific details in each natural resource agreement. The palm tree you can follow, you have to three palm trees and so on. So they have become really sophisticated. They haven't begun like that. They began very basic, but over the years they have evolved more specific agreements. The community meetings, which they held every month, and there is also an intercommunal meeting that happens every 2 months, and it's mandatory. I don't know how, but they managed to go, and it's not funded by any agency. They just, if there is funding, that makes things better. But it is not. They somehow manage, because they have this very strong concept of how important it is to get together, talk, and report back the community patrols and wildlife monitoring. This part specifically is the part that is the co-managing with the regional government. So they assume that, let's say, cost of patrolling and doing the wildlife monitoring. And also you have the community groups to manage natural resources. Although there are small communities, they have groups of people, they get together and discuss techniques of how they're going to sell certain products. It could be the same people participating in all of them, but they still have these spaces of dialogue. But they're all based on natural resource management. And they also have decision-making spaces, like community meetings and the intercommunal spaces, and the meetings of these small associations. When they gather, they talk, and they make decisions. So what we found from this research summer, at least that's now in my brain, so I put it here. So the social capital manifested in the community reinforces or influences conservation-based behavior, processes, and outcomes, which at the same time influences tourism products, community-based tourism products. And all the way back, the tourism product that requires coordination, dialogue, and so on, feeds back into social capital. So these 3 elements are very linked, and they depend on each other in different ways. So that was the idle phase that allowed me to go and introduce, make my head thing as a sociologist, anthropologist, kind of, which is what you've seen. It's not too easy. And so we get to the real phase, so after what happened in summer, and we've been working with my advisor during the semester, there is about to end. So we start examining the current condition of community-based tourism in the study area. So we realized that it's very community-based, it's not incorporated in any policy. The ecotourism operators in the city don't visualize communities. And while we were talking about this, we also discussed current and future challenges for communities, for protected area and tourism. As I mentioned before, sustainability was one of them. But as we were working on this, how to shape the bigger picture of the dissertation, we came along with this new set of challenges. We're developing infrastructure projects in the Amazon. And I know most of you are in the GR project of PCT, so very, 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 very familiar with this. But some of you know, go further. So those are some of the main infrastructure projects that are planned to constructed, built, and then next years in the Amazon basin. I incorporated airways because Iquitos is basically an island, so the only way you can get there is by airplane. So airplane transportation is a key element to understand the amount of people that can come. And from past experiences, I realized that the big ecotourism operators have a lot of power in terms of opening airways, like new airways. For instance, there's one company called Aqua Expedition. They have these luxury boats that goes along the Peruvian Amazon basin. And what they did is they opened a route for from Iquitos to Miami, so they can directly bring the tourists from Glass to Iquitos. So that gives you an idea of the power that they have. And we're only talking about one. So how the tourism could be a big thing if you want to can impact, has an impact on places like this where the only way to get in is by plane. So we were thinking about this, and then we came out with this infrastructure boom. So what's next is essentially my next chapter, or probably my we're thinking of it. So what we want is to understand how the infrastructure projects will affect tourism and conservation. So in order to do that, we will focus in three groups of stakeholders. There's the community managing tourism, by community-based tourism, the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs working in conservation, and the ecotourism operators in Iquitos, which is the largest city nearby. So all these three stakeholders use the same landscape in different ways, but we don't know how they interact, if they do, and how do they react, or how do they plan to react to this project. What tools and strategy, which is the word that we use for our project, are they planning to face these challenges? We have a guess that each of them, they don't know very much about each other. They don't visualize it, their way of conducting this. So we have the infrastructure projects, how will it affect the relationship and interaction between them, if there is. And there is also right now, they are in Loreto, they are elaborating the regional tourism plan for Loreto. And while I was there 2-3 weeks ago, project, I was able to participate in one of the meetings. And for the ecotourism operators, when the consultant asked about community-based tourism, they said it doesn't exist. So, of course, it doesn't exist for them because it doesn't address their economic needs. But there is this whole group of stakeholders that manage tourism, community level. They're not incorporated or envisioned or even put on the table when discussions of planning and policies are being taken. So I'm planning to also examine how this regional plan of tourism is being conducted. And they're incorporating chief integrated areas, but not the community. They're managing tourism. Because as I told you before, they're not envisioned. Communities are for management for tourism. There is a gap there. However, they do manage great extent of forests that serves for tourism attraction. So we kind of make this in research objective, which is to understand the role of infrastructure in conservation and tourism in the Loreto region by analyzing certain dimensions of social capital. We're focusing on this three ones that we figure out we can measure in these three groups of stakeholders. So measuring social capital is very complicated. The World Bank started something 12 years ago, and I downloaded all of the indexes, probably like 100 pages or so. So of course I won't do those questionnaires to the community. They're highly complicated, very specific. But there is some recent research on that, but it has to be like, I realize it has to be very handicraft. Very tailored for what you want to measure, where, when, to whom. So we are figuring out how to do that so we can get it. It will take a little time to sit down. Also something not only to measure communities that manage tourism, but to the NGOs that are working in conservation and to the ecotourism operators. So we can have a idea of what's going on there and also compare it. And social network characteristic of these three groups of stakeholders. Maybe they do interact very differently, or they don't, or they interact by different channels. So that's a big space of information that we don't have, but I am really interested in knowing. When I mentioned you the regional tourism plan, there's more. So I already told you, but I will do more field work, which I love, and I will try to do this. The next semester I will take the social network analysis class and get forward into that and figure out this. Not yet sure how, but I really want to. I think it's very interesting, and it's some element that is always missing in the natural resource management plans. Very technical, but the social part is not incorporated. So I'm not sure how to incorporate it, but I think it is relevant now that I know a little more about that. So, that was it. Thank you.